For video 2, we will be looking at the fill in the blank question types. So I've already got my assessment started called Practice 2. We'll jump right into doing the activities. We'll start with fill in the blank text. And for my artifact, I've got this Spanish activity using Gustar. I'm going to copy all that and paste it into the question setup. And it shows you what you're going to be doing for the correct answer setup, but we're going to get rid of those blanks because we're going to turn them into response boxes. It tells you up here to create a blank, type an underscore, and then you type the correct answer in the correct answer setup. However, you can also, there's a shortcut, use this box that has an R in it for insert response. So what I'm going to do is, instead of having this blank, I'm going to double click and click the R, and it puts in this little box that says one response. That means it's the first response box. Then you'll see it shows up blank here in the correct answer setup. So I'm going to do that for all the blanks. All right. So it numbers them 1 through 6 because there's 6 blanks. And I'm going to set up my correct answers using the key. So just copying and pasting. As I talked about in the previous video, you want to do partial match so they can get ones correct, counted correct, that are 100% correct, and you can also change the length of the answer box with the maximum length characters here, okay? So I can knock it down a little bit to 30. There's still going to be a lot of lead space, or I guess the opposite of lead, when you look at it, but you just have to note that that's as far as I can type. I'm trying to type more and I can't, so it does have this extra space left over, so just be aware of that. I usually count how many characters my longest answer is and add like 5 to that just to be safe or whatever. But you don't have to mess with the size if you don't want to. Something else to mention though, with the fill in the blank text, you can make it case sensitive or leave that off, but everything else is 100% sensitive. What do I mean? The student would have to type exactly what you have in the box for it to count it correct, that particular one. Now, it's not that big of a deal because I would always tell my students, ignore if it says that you missed it at first. I have to hand grade it and go in and give you partial credit, or if you accidentally put in a punctuation mark that wasn't in the answer setup key, then I just ignore that and I give you the full credit for that question. Which really, at the end of the day, is not much different than if you were hand grading a written paper, okay? In this case, though, if they happen to put it exactly how you have it in the correct answer setup, it's going to turn it green when you're going to grade it. It's going to show that particular box as green, and that means you can completely ignore it because it's 100% correct, right? But if a student were to write no le gusta bailar and put a period, if they put a period there in their answer, it would count that one wrong. Okay, I had the period here at the end of this sentence over here. So just be aware of that. It is a limitation, but again, it's just something that, and my students got really used to it. They always say, is this when you have to hand grade? I was like, yes, I have to hand grade it, so don't freak out when it shows that you got a bunch wrong, because I have to go in and hand grade it and make corrections, or make the adjustments on the points. So they got pretty used to that and understood that well. All right. But again, partial match, because any of the ones that they do happen to type in exactly how you set it up, it will count it as correct, and you won't even have to look at those or worry about those. Okay, if you do exact match, every single character has to be absolutely identical to this. All right, so let's save that. Now we'll do a fill in the blank drop down. And for this, I did another key that has the entire correct sentence, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. For this one, we're going to have them choose which is the correct form of the verb, singular or plural. So I'm double clicking on that, and I'm going to click the R square, and I'm just going to put a response box in. Okay. I will go ahead and do that for all the sentences. Now for this, you have to put in all the options for the responses separately for each response box. So the two possibilities are going to be gusta and gustan. And unfortunately, when you have the situation where they're all going to have the same choices from the drop-down menu, there's no way to expedite doing this other than you have to just copy and paste each of those into each of the sets of responses. And for some reason they go back, response 1 is here, 2's on the second column, instead of, to me it'd be more logical to go down and then across, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. Just be aware of that if you are having to have separate choices, which is usually the case, or often the case. So I'm just going to put the 2 option blanks for each of these, and then I'm just going to copy and paste the singular form, and then copy and paste gustan. Alright, now I have to set up the correct answers. So just go in, whoops, gusta, gustan, singular, plural, singular, and singular. And again, you probably want to do partial match, so if they get some of them correct but some wrong, they get partial credit. For the additional setup on this one, if you want there to be a placeholder text instead of it being blank, so you could do choose one. What this does, I'll show you the preview. So it just says choose one now. Okay, so students would know to click on there and choose the correct one, plural, and then that shows that's correct. Okay, if we had done this one wrong, it shows which one's wrong. So for the student view, if you have it on students can see what they missed, so it's that yes choice on the setup, they would see this, but not this yellow box down here. If you instead chose yes with correct answers, then this would be pretty much their exact view on that when they're going back and looking at the corrected assessment. Okay. And you can also, just by the way, if for whatever reason you needed to have a different placeholder text, you could do it for each of the ones. Let's say placeholder 1 needed some other directions, like choose 2, if there were, several choices or something. Well, I guess you couldn't choose 2. Anyway, if it says, choose the first one, that works, or whatever. Then what that'll do is placeholder 1 for the first question, it'll have that, and then all the other ones, it'll have what's considered the default. So see how that does that. I never ever had more than one of those placeholders, so I don't know if you'd come up with a reason to do that, but maybe you would. Okay, and sometimes I didn't even do it at all, or put it in fridge, put it in target language if you want to. All right, so we'll save that one. And then for the drag and drop, this is the fill in the blank that I used the most often. I'm going to use that same set of sentences. For this one, I'm going to take out the indirect object pronoun and have those be what the students have to choose. So again, just double clicking on the word. Oh, didn't do the top ones. Right. Now I have to put in the options. So we got me, they, nos, and lace. Is that all the ones? Yeah, okay. So I don't need this one. And then this looks similar to what we've done before, where there's the boxes down here, and then you drag and drop or click and drop. Now for this one, there's going to be duplicates, so you definitely want to click duplicate responses, right? So is lay, may, there's another lay, okay, to choose. Lace, nos, and may. So you want duplicate responses because there was two lay and two may. And partial match. This you can put how wide it is, since these are all 2 or 3 characters. If you wanted to smush it down, you could probably go to 50 pixels. And by the way, you don't have to put in that PX, it's going to automatically know. And so I think 50 is the smallest you can make something. Yeah, so then you can practice and see what the students would see. Oops, not doing very well. Me. So those are correct. Again, if you had something wrong, that's what it would look like for the students. Say that. By the way, at any point you can go in and preview what the whole test or the whole assessment looks like at that point. So you just click on preview, and this is exactly what it's going to look like for the students. So this is the landing page, and if you'd had any of the instructions from the setup, this is where they would show. But again, I mentioned in the last video, students can't go back to this page without leaving the whole assessment and then coming back, which not that big a deal. They can do it. It's not, as long as because there's not a timer on it that they've run out, or if there's a end date that you put on it, it's no big deal to leave and come back. They do it all the time, but it's a little inconvenient if they're needing to look at the instructions over and over. So starting new attempt, this shows you how many, so the students will know if you gave them more than one time. Okay, and so notice the questions are numbered down here, so they can pop back and forth by clicking on the number or the arrow. Okay, you can practice writing in. Okay, and it's not showing you anything that's correct because this is a preview, all right? But it's not going to save anything, and students won't be able to see any of this, and you won't be able to submit it as if it were a finished product. It's just practicing exactly what it would look like for the students as they're doing it. And you can play around with some of the tools, those toolbars that were part of the setup. Okay, you can play around with that on your own. All right, looks good. All right, so this is good for editing and making sure everything looks really good. Okay, review is going back just to whichever one, and then normally a student's going to have a submit button, but there's not one for this preview. Okay, so we just click that and go back to it. You can always manually move around things. One thing I found out though is that you should refresh after you've done that, because sometimes it's persnickety and it doesn't stick, okay, if you don't refresh. Right, I can change my points. I could make this one worth 20 and this one worth 50 and this one worth 30 if I wanted to weight them that way. I always like to have my 100, although like I said in the last video, you don't have to. That can be whatever it is, but it's just smart to leave it at least, maybe by 10 also, if you wanted to. One thing I would also do is I would try to go in and say, okay, there's how many questions? All right, there's 6, so maybe they're each worth 3 points, so that'd be 18. Right, so I could give that one 18 points and then adjust the others also according to how many questions they had to try to come up with a reasonable way to come up with 100. So that's just a teacher thing that you would have to do. Okay. Believe that is all. So I did want to say one other thing on that one about the fill in the blank text, where you have to have the students have to sorry, motorcycle just went by my house. Students have to put it exactly how you have it in the key in order for it to count it right. I'm gonna go over that way I keep talking about in the next video. Sorry, it's going to be in the last video actually, using the label image that is going to kind of do away with any problems of that nature. Okay, but again, at the end of the day, it's the same thing as if you were grading by hand. You would have to look at all of them anyway. This way, if they happen to type in exactly what's right, it counts as correct, and so you don't even have to worry about that one. All right? Repeating myself over and over, I know. So, I think that's that for this one. I'll have of course, on the slide deck, the instructions, which are going to be very similar to the previous one as far as what you're creating. And I tried to make this one shorter, so I didn't make it real fancy with images and stuff like that, but please feel free. In fact, I would like for you to try using images. You can even go ahead and try to start using some, if you want to give directions in the target language, for example, and you can do, you can record audio, okay? So I could say, choisissez la meilleure réponse pour toutes ces questions. Right? Listen back to it. I don't know if that played on the video, but maybe it did. But I heard it, okay? And you can still preview it. You can show how it shows. Is it just a little button like that says play? Minimal is just going to be the icons. Alright, so you can play around with that if you want to. And there's some math stuff too over here, so I usually don't mess with any of that. Okay, so that would be something else you could do, just for fun. You could do a video too as well if you wanted to have your beautiful mug showing to your students as you give them instructions. Alright, so have fun creating your second practice with fill in the blank